A few days ago, I'd been wanting to make a video using information from a video recently made by Dr. Todd Grande, where he talked about Jim Jones and whether or not Jim Jones could be thought of as a cult leader, what makes a cult leader. And I thought that I would take what Dr. Todd Grande says in his video and just relate it in a very basic manner to the Chad and just see, is the Chad a cult leader? I thought I'd still go ahead and just put out these discussion points, and of course whatever I say in any video, I mean, if I mention him, it does not reflect on Dr. Todd Grande's intellectual property, knowledge, beliefs, whatever he said in his video. This is just all just my own imaginings, just my own discussion points using what Dr. Todd Grande has said in his video, just using that as some fodder, some information, and of course, I in no way want to misrepresent Dr. Todd Grande. I'm sure most of you, or if not all of you, watch him already and admire his videos. So yeah, just wanted to say that. So, okay, the Chadists and the cult of the gathered. So whilst Jim Jones might have had flair and balls for self-promotion, the Chad definitely has flair and balls. He's very uncharismatic, but he has flair and balls. He has flair and balls for murder. So yeah, dastardly plans tick. Chad's self-promotion was about his dreams and visions, wasn't it? It was about his visions, which makes him special, being able to have those visions, and his projections of the future that made him special. Jim Jones was made special by being a deity. So they both are able to tolerate aspects of roles that others would find very unpleasant and distasteful. Jim Jones growing up, he did a lot of work that others wouldn't really like, but he was able to get stuck in. I mean, Jim Jones, had a lot of potential and a lot of good qualities growing up. The Chad, he's a grave digger, and he thoroughly dug that job by all accounts. Chad returned to that job over and again. I think he began it when he was studying as a young man, in the same way that some people may work at McDonald's or Woolworths. And Chad had, a close relationship with the cemetery and enjoyed being a gravedigger. Doomsday predictions. So Jim Jones predicted to his followers that Indianapolis was going to come under assault. It was going to receive a nuclear message from the government. So Jim Jones managed to move his group out of Indianapolis, and the Chad got people to move to Rexburg. He did this over a number of years, actually. It wasn't just Laurie, Melanie Boudreau and Alex Cox. Many people went to Rexburg upon the suggestion of the Chad, since 2015 in fact. So doomsday predictions and testing people to the limit, talking about second comings and talking about evil on earth. The fear tactics used, Jim Jones was perfect with the fear tactics, for example, nuclear war against people in Indianapolis by their own government. And the Chad used dark and light and zombies. Other fear tactics Jim Jones used, though, were to get people to prove their loyalty by signing confession forms. So on these confession forms, who knows what it stated, but they would sign that they had committed crimes, and Jim Jones would hold those forms so that if ever they wanted to leave or needed to be controlled or manipulated, he had a confession from them stating that perhaps they had committed robbery or insurance fraud, whatever it was. And it was insurance fraud, it was the divorces and the marriages, etc., that the Chad had over his followers. So similarities there. So what did Dr. Todd Grande say is a definition of a cult? There were 6 or 7 points. Authoritarian and manipulative. I'd say that covers Chad. Uses mind control strategies. Well, definitely. The Chad was able to get people to believe in his visions. He was able to get people to believe in light and dark, and he did seem to get inside their heads and control how they thought and felt, and made them probably afraid to disconnect from what he was saying, because he was very believable to these people. Tends to target middle-class citizens. Well, I think that seems to be the case with the people in Rexburg and the people that, Chad dragged in, could possibly say that. Based around communal goals. Yes, the communal goals of survival, of being the ones that know the truth about, around communal goals of having the deepest spirituality and of being special, of being one of the 144,000. Using aggressive conversion methods. Well, I think actually it is a little bit aggressive. Telling people that their family members are dark or light is extremely aggressive. Also singling people out, Chad in his own creepy way, and having Laurie, who would visit people in their homes, text people regularly. She never relented. She had that outgoing confidence, and they would target new people in the area and just bombard them like that. So I think that's pretty aggressive. Attempts to indoctrinate members using a system. Using this belief system and employing a new belief system in the culture of origin. Yeah, the culture of origin being the Mormon church. And if you are part of the Mormon church, then you're already indoctrinated into some pretty deep supernatural beliefs and some, what do they call it? Magical thinking and that sort of thing. So, half the work is already done for the Chad and Laurie. So to be a cult leader would involve being a narcissist. So Dr. Todd Grande talked about Jim Jones. Could he be a narcissist? What were the points there? I think he had 8 out of 9. So grandiosity. Well, the Chad certainly has that in spades, doesn't he? He is pretty much numero uno on earth. He is pretty much a deity, and he's pretty much the leader of this 144,000, and he's the only one that has this ticket to ride. He knows everything. I think that's a tick. Fantasies of unlimited power, a belief in being special, and arrogance. And Dr. Tom Jones, said, Dr. Todd Grande said, Jim Jones, creating Jonestown and thinking of himself as a deity, or saying that he's a deity, well, that covered those 3. And I think we can believe that the Chad had fantasies of unlimited power. He did believe in being special, and he was certainly arrogant. Next up is excessive need for admiration. Then we've got a sense of entitlement. I mean, wow, does anything explain better the Chad and Laurie than a sense of entitlement? I mean, that nails it. Manipulative. No empathy. There wasn't a lot of empathy shown, was there, for Tammy, JJ, Tylee, Charles. I'd say, in fact, zero empathy. Envy, or believing others envy you. Now, that was one that Dr. Todd Grande thought that Jim Jones probably didn't express through his person, but I think Chad had a lot of envy in his life, and he was envious of the ease with which some people live their life. It probably even envious of Charles, for example, of how successful he was, what a actually genuine stand-up guy he was, how genuinely liked Charles was. Yeah. And then he said, Todd Grande said that, you know, not all narcissists are psychopathic, just some. And some then, not all would have antisocial personality, but some would, and some would be psychotic. I think he means of the cult leaders. So just to quickly recap, what would make up a cult leader? Jim Jones versus the Chad. So they can tolerate aspects of jobs others can't, such as morbid jobs. Jim Jones used to handle corpses, and the Chad dug graves. Jim Jones has a flair and balls for self-promotion, and the Chad has a flair and balls to kill. Self-promotion, the Chad also, would say he could read thoughts, and he also had visions. They both had the doomsday predictions. They both managed to get people to move. They both used fear tactics, dark versus light, a fear of retribution in the case of Jim Jones because of those signed confessions, etc. Also, the members learned how to deflect questions from others, and we saw that with Melanie Boudreau-Pawlowski, didn't we? Deflection. And Jim Jones's members could do that as well. They were masters at that, and they were taught how, and they were taught what to say. They are separated from others, and they become paranoid. So Jim Jones at Guyana, he would say that there were mercenaries and tigers in the jungle, and the Chad said that there were zombies. They both had to have their people prove loyalty. So the Chad had people prove loyalty with these insurance policies, with these divorces, with these all those spousal happenings. And Jim Jones had the loyalty through those confession forms. They both have distinguished beliefs from the mainstream. They both say they're deity, except interestingly, Jim Jones was an atheist, told his wife that as well. And they commit fraud, and they believe in an ability of supernatural powers. Okay, so other similarities, extreme preparedness, and Jim Jones had his people get guns, ammo and food, and we know that the Chad is involved in preparing a people, and that involves collections of supplies to last you separately, sovereignly, I guess. They both wrote books. They lure by fear. When they want people, when they're scared, not to trust themselves, they turn to others, just turn to the leader only, turn to the group. Rebaptizing, so the church doing nothing. They think the church is doing nothing because these people that they're following are correct. They think that's why the church is sort of ignoring them or just letting it all happen. So the church, by telling them to ignore, they're basically being complicit. So, when the people following these leaders have the option of choosing, are these people snakes or are they saints? They think, well, maybe they're saints because the church isn't shutting it down. So other similarities are pulling families apart. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. So I wanted to then talk about this letter that someone wrote to the leaders of the LDS Church, because they were deeply concerned about what Laurie and the Chad were doing. And they said that they wanted them to look into the members of this church, because they were claiming true priesthood and authority. They said in this letter that they draw people in because they're very active in the church and they are well versed in scripture, which they take out of context. What do we know about Laurie? Laurie's favourite place was church and the temple. Laurie would have been there every day if she could. She spent most of her time there, and she was well versed in scripture. When asked why they still attended the church, so when members of the group that wrote this letter asked these people why they still attended church, what did they say? Well, they said to get as many of the elect as possible. They like to keep their temple recommendations. They stay active so they can get us to listen one by one. So, people in the Mormon church, they need their temple recommendations so that they can take part in other activities. We know that Chad, in his own creepy way would approach people one by one, and Laurie, in a very outgoing way, would approach people, draw them in. She would go to new members, make friends, invite them to her home. She would visit them at their home, and she would text them constantly. She kept that pressure up. So she would home teach. So this is what the letter says. They home teach and run certain activities like that. They greet the new people. They tell them that they have a new enlightening truth. And, they're making these visits to people's homes. They're texting them. And they are saying that there is impending doom for anyone that ignores them. So, and this is exactly what we know of Laurie and the Chad, what they were doing. Laurie loved having groups at home and teaching scripture, teaching her own version of it. It would have become more and more wild as the time with the Chad went on. And, and they reached the people that, it would have been very hard to be in the Mormon church for some people. It's a hard line to walk, and if you're a human being, very difficult. But Laurie grabbed those people, the Chad grabbed those people and made them feel that there was a place for them, that they could enjoy their spirituality, that it was fun, it was exciting, and that they had a place to belong, and that they did fit in. And that's what Laurie and Chad did. And they belonged to these groups, AVOW, AVOW, and to Preparing a People. And they could get people that already had certain ideas, and they could, they just had to twist those screws a little bit further. Then I've written down, and I can't remember what context, but it would have been something Todd Grande said about Jim Jones: repeated criminal behaviour, deceitfulness, aggression, disregard for safety and a lack of remorse, well, murder covers that, impulsivity and irresponsibility. And Jim Jones, he's not, this is the thing with all people like this, they're not going for everyone. It's like the people, the Nigerian scammers, they're not going for everyone. They are going for the suckers that will connect with them. It's a very small percentage, but that's all they need, and that's who they go for. When they find them, they can really connect to them, and they can plug them into their madness. So there you have it. Is the Chad a cult leader? Well, I believe he's certainly trying to set up his own little group. He was well underway. He had his 2IC. He had his ideas on what people had to do to belong. He had his ideas on how to keep people there. He definitely ruled by fear. He had things over people. Melanie Boudreau-Pulowski, she is, as I've said, in it up to here, should be arrested. She had knowledge about those children because she tried to kill her husband. She was in on that. Melanie Gibb, also not innocent. Many people aren't, and I hope law enforcement are now going to go as deep and dense as they can into this and get every last little scrap of human depravity out of this and prosecute them. The Chad and Laurie are abominations, and they are where they belong, and I'm sure in due course they are going to get their just desserts. Thanks for listening. See you later.